So unfortunately, during that time my parents were in Mexico, we only took our kids down once. And that's where I grew up. That's where my roots are. And it took me getting down to Cabo and the Baja to realize Mexico is where my heart is. It's what feels like home. And I feel 100% safe there. The genuine, authentic people that are there, you cannot find anywhere, in my opinion, in the world. You just can't. And you just feel like everyone's just family. Everyone just becomes family.
I feel the same way. And that's why I moved here 18 years ago next month.
Welcome to the Nick Fong Podcast. As the broker and owner of Ronival Real Estate, Nick has spent nearly 20 years in Baja California Sur. And in this podcast, he'll be talking everything Baja, from food and culture to real estate and property management. And now, here's your host, Nick Fong.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. And today I have two special guests, George and Susie Dover in Mesa, Arizona, and Chandler, Arizona, right next to each other. I had the pleasure of meeting you both a couple weeks ago on a recent trip to Loretto, and more specifically, Danzante Bay. And your story was pretty profound to me because it started not in Loretto. But before we get into it, welcome George and Susie.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick.
And
We're excited to be here.
well, thank you for joining us. Our viewers and listeners really will get a kick out of your story. But before we dive into your story here in the Baja, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourselves? You're right now in Arizona. Are you both originally from Arizona?
So it's actually kind of cool, Nick, because I was born in Mexico. I was born in Chihuahua. And I lived there till I was 7 and then moved to the States. So I've been in the States ever since. I am a wife to George, and we have 3 awesome kids. And I'm also a photographer. And that's just a little bit about myself.
And George, what are you doing in Chandler and what's your business?
So I started a company about 25 years ago called Cascade Financial Services, and my career has been in the mortgage finance industry, but my company specifically specializes entirely on financing prefabricated homes, so manufactured homes built in a more affordable fashion in a factory and then delivered to a lot and put together there. It's kind of a unique take on mortgage banking in the US, and we lend on those homes across the country.
Okay, so you both are still working right now.
Yes.
Okay. And tell everyone when you first came to Baja Sur. Susie?
So it's kind of a cool story. About 5, 6 years ago, I was on an airplane heading down to Cancun with my daughter on a girls' trip. There was a cute lady, and I assumed at the time it was her daughter that came on the plane. And she had a beach bag that said "Vamos a la playa." And I told her, I'm like, "Oh, I love your beach bag." And that started a friendship. And next thing I know, she's flying my daughter and myself down to Cabo, where they have a home. And we're filming and photographing her 50th birthday party. So I had never been down to the Baja. George and I had always talked about going to Cabo, but never made it down. And then that started with that. And then next thing we know, she's inviting our whole family. And then after that, shortly after that, then we're buying into the home with them. So we were in Cabo for a couple of years in that home
Yeah, and specifically, what community was that house located?
in Pedregal.
Yeah, and so the Pedregal is very popular with our clients because it's centrally located. It's a great vacation rental property community, and it's just, you could walk if you're willing to endure the hills of the Pedregal into town. You definitely don't want to walk back, and but George, you and Susie decided that you were going to venture into something else in the Baja. Tell us about that experience or that thought process.
Well, it was triggered initially because the friend that the friends that we had met, that Susie had met her first on the plane, and we'd become good friends with them. And for a number of reasons, they desired to buy us out of their home, the home we bought into, because they want to live there full time primarily. And so we were bought out of that home and immediately started looking for other options. And Cabo was first and only on our mind at the time, but there's a few things in Cabo that I missed that I felt it didn't have for me personally. One of those specifically is really good access to places where you can snorkel and enjoy the sea life. And in Cabo, there's just not as many swimming beaches or great places to get in the water if you're maybe not a surfer. So I started looking around, and we were familiar with La Paz. We'd been there once before, looked at that. But every time we would fly back and forth from Phoenix to Cabo, we'd fly over the La Paz and the Loretto areas. And I look down and I see the islands down there and the water, and Susie and I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean, and in Hawaii before we started to love the Baja. And those waters looked as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than anything I'd ever seen. So I just wanted to get there. And so we were looking at a lot of different properties and options in Cabo, and we have a very specific budget that we couldn't go outside of. With all that in play, we spent months looking at different options in Cabo, and we went to Loretto. We went to Danzante Bay, to Villa del Palmar. Susie reluctantly went initially because it's an all-inclusive, and we are not big fans of all-inclusives for a number of reasons. We're a little bit food snobs, and that's the main reason. But fortunately, she acquiesced, and we went there. And the experience we had was incredible. The feeling I get at Danzante Bay is different than anywhere else I've been in the world. And every time we go down there, we've been out on the water and had experiences that in my lifetime I haven't had in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, or anywhere like that, in Hawaii, anywhere like that. And so we initially were hoping to build a home down in Danzante Bay and purchase a lot. Right. But we had budget constraints, and that we weren't sure if that was going to work out either. And then fortunately for us, as we were trying to make a decision, the Mantarraya condominiums in Danzante Bay were released, and the price point was absolutely perfect for us. And so immediately we jumped on there, and I was thrilled because that's where my heart was from the first moment we got there. And Susie had there's other interests that Susie has that pushed us a little bit maybe towards Cabo, but I could let her maybe talk to those, but gives you a little background as to how we ended up there.
So Susie, you didn't initially want to go to Loretto, so you reluctantly went. And tell us about that experience when you first arrived to an all-inclusive resort. I mean, an amazing setting, but not necessarily the type of experience that you were looking for.
Yeah, so it was for our anniversary back in July. What is it, our 26th? 27th? I don't know. Anyway, and George said, "Hey, check out this place. I want to go down and stay." And he said all inclusive. And right away I was like, "No way, I'm not doing an all inclusive. I'm just way too picky with food and so forth." So anyway, we got down there, and by that evening, the magic started just happening. The peace, the calmness, the beauty, everything just kind of started coming together. And I remember being out in the ocean snorkeling. First off, we went out on the first time on a boat, and there was like 1,000 manta rays under us. It was mating season. And we were like, we never see this in Cabo. What the heck? And then we get to our first snorkeling spot, and we're out there. The water's calm. The sea life is just like nothing I've ever seen. And we're in the water, and I come up just to breathe for a minute, and George pops his head up. I won't use the exact words he used, but he said, "I want to freaking live here." and I mean, it was just, it happened so quickly. And with that being said, after we returned after this magical, awesome vacation with actually amazing food, great service, good times, everything was wonderful. When we started thinking about the option of living there, all of a sudden I step back because I'm a people person. I thrive on lots of people and being around lots of people. And I had some real hesitations. And then it just took us going down a few more times and continuing to feel that peace and calmness and seeing that beauty and magic. And then I'm like, you know what? Everything, the stars just started aligning and it all just happened. I think I showed you this, Nick, but I even got this tattoo
Stars.
that shows the stars aligning. And it was literally because that's how we felt. And I felt what was happening in moving forward with going to Loretto.
And access is a big thing also. So you actually can fly into the Loretto International Airport, correct?
Yeah. Starting January 11th, American is flying down 6 days a week ongoing. And it used to be what, 3, sometimes 4, depending on the season, and 6 days a week. So I think word is spreading. And, this little hidden gem, people are really starting to find out about.
Well, Carrie and Danya, our sales agents on site, we did a podcast with them a couple weeks ago when we met each other. And they reluctantly were saying, yeah, we're doing this for a living, making money, selling this resort, but we're conflicted because the pristineness, the quiet serenity that you just mentioned, they're like, it kind of goes against why we're here. And so when we did meet for the first time a couple weeks ago, you actually brought a friend with you. Isn't that right?
We did.
And
Yeah.
so tell us about that. Like, you go back home, you're gonna buy your next home. And how does that happen where you bring a friend down?
Susie has a way of meeting people everywhere she goes. So
Yeah.
we met these friends on one of our previous flights to Loretto. They were trying it out for the first time as well. So we talked to them on the way down, and they happened to be on our flight back. And we talked to them on the way back. And then we ran into them at a local restaurant that's in between our homes in Mesa that weekend. And we became really good friends. And they're also interested in possibly a condo down there now or maybe in the future. But they loved it and fell in love with it as well. And so he came down specifically with us last time to look at the models that are completed and get a feel for it.
Okay, so a lot of our clients, before they buy something, one of their top concerns is safety. Can you talk to us about the safety when you were in Cabo and now in Loretto?
And are you talking about
Crime.
maybe just to clarify, okay, crime and like maybe U.S. citizens' concerns about going to Mexico?
Correct.
We hear that too. When we talk to people about our plans, when our youngest graduates next spring, and when we take delivery of our condo at Danzante Bay, we're going to spend most of our time down there and make that our home. We've been going to Mexico all our life. As Susie mentioned, she was born there, and her family, while being Caucasian, is truly more Mexican by culture in many ways. So we've never had a fear of going to Mexico. And I personally feel like a lot of the fears that US citizens have about going to Mexico because of crime, they always bring up the cartel. I just think they're mostly uneducated fears. If you stay out of problem areas, you're not going to have problems, but there's a lot of danger in the US. I personally feel much safer in Mexico. The peace I feel at Danzante Bay can't be matched anywhere I've found in the US. So it's not an issue. Security, safety, it's just not a concern to me personally.
Susie, how do you feel about that?
I agree with George 100%. it's interesting when our kids were young, my parents lived in Los Mochis. And the whole time they were there, we only took our kids down once because with young kids and as a mother, and I had that mindset that maybe, some Americans tend to have where, oh, we can't take our kids down there, it's not safe, or all these things. And I think unfortunately it's just a lot of hearsay. They talk to one person and, oh, I heard this, and when you hear it through the grapevine, the story isn't even how it really happened from the get-go.
Right.
And so unfortunately during that time my parents were in Mexico, we only took our kids down once, and that's where I grew up, that's where my roots are. And it took me getting down to Cabo and the Baja to realize Mexico is where my heart is. It's what feels like home, and I feel 100% safe there. The genuine, authentic people that are there, you cannot find anywhere, in my opinion, in the world. You just can't. And you just feel like everyone's just family. Everyone just becomes family.
I feel the same way. And that's why I moved here 18 years ago next month.
Oh,
And
wow.
what are you, do you both play golf? Because this is located on an incredible golf course.
So I like to golf a little bit.
A
And
little.
that was, the Danzante checks all the boxes for us. And, Susie talked about needing people there, and we could talk a little bit more about the smallness versus how big Cabo is. But the golf box, Danzante Bay checks better than any other location in the world. And, I was thinking about that before this podcast. And Nick, I've had experiences golfing at TPC Danzante Bay that anybody that golfs and is reasonably good and enjoys it knows that feeling when you hit your shot just right. Your swing is right, and the ball comes off crisp and it sounds perfect, and you watch the ball fly in exactly where you envisioned you were going to put it. And there's a feeling that only golfers that golf at that level know how that feels. Something happens at Danzante Bay when you do that. It's even more spectacular and special. And I've experienced that on almost every hole at Danzante Bay. It's like, I don't know if it's quieter or that something about the setting as you watch that ball fly is incredible. And I never experienced it on any other golf course at that level. So I'm really looking forward to that. Golf was a big part of this decision for me.
And Susie, do you get out onto the links at all with George?
No.
No?
But one day I'll ride along and take some pictures.
There you go. There you go. And when we were there 2 weeks ago, we were hitting some golf balls, and I managed to lose the golf director's driver. Yeah, that if you follow us on Instagram, you'll get the full blow by blow of that whole experience. What are you most excited about come next year when you get delivered your condo, Susie?
So for me, I think it's just every time we've been down there the last few months, I think we've been down 4 or 5 times now. We continue to meet new people. And I look forward to continuing to meet people, becoming a part of the community, immersing ourselves in the community, and building a photography business down there. And just really taking in the peace, the calmness, the magic, and the happiness that I feel when I'm there.
And for you, George?
I'm excited about, I mean, I wrote down a list, and we probably don't have time to go over it. I mean, there's nothing about Danzante Bay that doesn't excite me about the future. From fishing, snorkeling, scuba diving, paddle boarding, the golf, the different, just hundreds of private beaches to go to, the food. I guess one thing, it's just overall wellness. We've we've raised our family for the most part, and worked really hard, both of us, like a lot of people. And it's a time in where we're looking to structure the reward of that work, quite frankly. And we're not going to stop working. We'll never stop working. It's a nice environment being in work from home environment and world now where I can work from Danzante Bay, and Susie has great potential down there with photography. So we'll continue to work, but in a setting without the daily stress and pressures that we've had to deal with as we've raised our family here. And yet we're still so close. Our youngest son will be at ASU, and we're an hour and 20-minute flight away from him, or him to us.
Yeah.
It's really no different. It doesn't take us any longer to get from Danzante Bay to Phoenix than it does from Los Angeles to Phoenix. And it's the living in wellness in a place that is as peaceful as the Danzante Bay, framed by the Sonoran Mountains around it, is. And then the Mantarraya condominiums that the developers put together with wellness in mind, and health centers, massage, gyms, not to mention you have, nobody says this, but I think Danzante Bay has got to be the paddleboarding capital of the world, because there couldn't be a better place in the world to paddleboard. And health is important to Susie and I. We want to be in shape. Between golf and all of those activities and continuing to work, we're going to be very busy and very happy down there.
When are you guys going back down? Are you going to go back down before the end of the year?
We were thinking of it, but have decided to wait until January. And we're actually taking our daughter this time, who hasn't been down there. So she's excited to see it.
Yeah.
And we're taking some friends, because I'm going to be doing some shoots of them so that I can start, rebranding and building my website. So
Fantastic. Well, guys, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you at Danzante Bay in one of your trips. I don't think I mentioned this to you, but we're going to have an event there in February. So we'll stay in touch. President's Weekend. And so if you guys can make it out, you're more than invited to come on out for that event launch.
hey,
We'll be
Nick,
there.
before we go, I want to just do a shout out to you and to Dee and Carrie and Scott. You guys, George and I talk about this all the time. We have never worked with a real estate team as honest, as authentic, as kind, as caring as you guys. And it really has, it literally has meant everything to us. So thank you.
Wow, and I did not pay you for that, did I?
No, I had to tell you. I just had to tell you. Yeah.
Well, thanks to you both. I look forward to staying in touch, and congratulations again on your new home. It's soon to be delivered in a few months. And everyone, if you want to connect and learn more about Mantarraya Residences, you know where to find me. And until the next one, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nick Fong Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ronival Real Estate, and follow Nick on Instagram at NickFong_Ronival. Ready to find your Baja dream home? Check out the latest property listings at Ronival.com or findmexicohouses.com. Hasta luego.